And while still standing, let's take the national prayer. If you have a copy of the program, it's just next to it, and it's also the second stanza of our national anthem. So, after me, O God of creation, please be seated. The special guest of honor, who is also the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the Acting Executive Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the chairman of the roundtable discussion this morning, lead presenter at the roundtable, top management staff of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, very senior government officials, service chiefs here represented, and the top brass of the paramilitary agencies also here represented, civil society organizations and other champions of anti-corruption, corporate chieftains and other titans, my lords spiritual and temporal.
Good morning. Glad to have you join us at this time. This is the NTA, Africa's largest TV network with an unbeatable reach, transmitting live here in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, bringing you proceedings at the event today, the 11th of July, a date set aside by the African Union, AU, as African Anti-Corruption Day, taking place at the Yaradua Center under the auspices of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, with the theme towards a common African position on asset recovery. My name is Kolo Muhammad, and on behalf of the outside broadcast crew saddled with the responsibility of bringing you the event live, I welcome you and thank you for joining us on the NTA. The impact of corruption on the continent's economic development is visible and cannot be underestimated. Corruption is not a victimless crime and often affects those who suffer most, vulnerable, poor and marginalized citizens.
It's towards a common African position on asset recovery. And this segment of the activities is a roundtable conversation that will feature an assemblage of very distinguished scholars and anti-corruption activists, who will introduce them presently. But in the meantime, just before we skip introductions and recognitions, because while we were awaiting the commencement of this event, we had actually recognized a number of the dignitaries who are present. And if you are at the lower rung of the auditorium, you were to look up, you will also find that the upper level is also filled almost to the rafters. We thank you for being around, but I will crave your indulgence to recognize some of the dignitaries who are here one more time before inviting the acting chairman of the EFCC to deliver his welcome address. First, and she indeed was one of those who came in much earlier, the former chairman of the EFCC, Dr. Mrs. Farida Waziri. And we also have a very powerful delegation from the NNPC. I don't know how they worked this out, but they are 11 in number. Maybe they were trying to mirror the Super Eagles last night against South Africa. And the skipper of the team is the Group Managing Director, Mr. Mele Kiari. Mr. Kiari, pleasure to have you with us in our midst. The Chief of Army Staff is here represented by If you are looking at him now, you will see his rank is Major General. But a few days ago, he was moved upstairs, and is now a Lieutenant General, but the decoration is yet to take place. Major General, Lieutenant General Lamidi Adeosun. The Chief of Naval Staff is also represented here. And in this case, as Nigerians will say, your time will come. So there is no confusion as to your rank. Rear Admiral Nageno, pleasure to have you around. The Managing Director and CEO of NDIC is right here in our midst on the front row. Pleasure to have you around with us. And the chairman of the conversation section, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, is already here. The leadership of the NLC, the chairperson of delegations from Johesu, and several others are present. As we proceed, and we have enough time, we shall have some more recognitions. So the special guests of honor, very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's now my singular honor and privilege to invite the acting executive chairman of the EFCC, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, to deliver his welcome address.
The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, my elder brother, Mr. Boss Mustafa, representative of the head of the civil service of the Federation, a representative of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Adesu, representative of the Chief of Naval Staff, the Managing Director of the NDIC, the Managing Director of the NNPC, representative of the Director General of NAPTIP, representative of the Controller General of Custom and Controller General of Prison, and the Controller General of Civil Defense and Immigration, representative of the DG NITSTA, Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Shippers Council, Dr. Tayo Oke Afe Bobalola University, representative of the MD AMPCON, the DG NEMA, the Statistician General of the Federation, Chairman Savannah Center for Diplomacy and Development, our father, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the former chairman of the EFCC, my mother, Mrs. Farida Waziri, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, permit me to stand on the other existing protocol led by the MC. It is my privilege to welcome you to this public lecture to mark this year's edition of the African Anti-Corruption Day. I appreciate everyone here present for this collective endeavor aimed at facilitating the growth and development of the African continent. We should, as a people, be challenged to do this continually for the present and future generation of Nigerians. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, DG Bond, you are missing on the protocol. The African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption was adopted in Maputo, Mozambique on the 11th July 2003 and came into force in the year 2006. To date, the convention has been ratified by 40 member states of the African Union. Since the adoption of the convention, African states have made tremendous progress in the fight against corruption, including the establishment of national laws and the creation of anti-corruption agencies. In recognition of the significant progress that has been made and cognizant of the need to continually reflect on approaches to end corruption, the African Union designated July 11 as African Anti-Corruption Day. This year will mark the third edition of the African Anti-Corruption Day. Worthy of note, too, is that this year shall also mark 10 years since the establishment of the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are therefore gathered here not just to commemorate the African Anti-Corruption Day, but also as an anti-corruption stakeholders to reflect on the challenges of asset recovery in Africa and solicit contributions and support in the development of a common African position on asset recovery and return. This year's commemoration is special and unique to us at the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, particularly as a team chosen by the African Union. It's an aspect that the Commission is very passionate about. It is my belief that the choice of the team toward a common African position on asset recovery is particularly necessary and timely to take the anti-corruption war to a higher dimension, as corruption remains a great challenge in the development of our country. One of the outcomes of corruption, which is a flourishing illicit financial flows from the continent, is a major developmental albatross, negatively impacting the achievement of the continent's sustainable development goals. Corruption affects the security of a nation, as we have experienced in Nigeria in recent times. The situation distorts the stability and national economic planning process. As a result of the review of priorities to accommodate their security challenges, given the constitutional imperative which places a premium on the security of lives and property as critical functions of government. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have to come to terms with the fact that organized criminal groups have developed intricate channels of illicit financial flows that deprive African economies of crucial resources for development. Such resources end up in safe havens across the globe. We often have challenges in recovering of assets stashed away in some of these countries. Money stolen, asset bought with the proceeds of the stolen fund. You investigate, you work with the law enforcement agency in the other country, and you identify the money, block them, identify the asset, fixed asset, but to get them back, repatriated back to this country, that is very reluctant. Africa needs all her assets back. While unity among nations in the African continent is critical in demanding the recovery and return of all stolen money and assets, we also need accountability and transparency in the utilization of returned assets. However, we have long come to the realization that our one person, continent, agency, or country alone cannot fight corruption and win. Today, more than ever before, we need more collaboration, and I'm happy. Almost all the law enforcement agencies in this country are represented in this hall. Almost all the professional bodies are also represented in this board. That's a good encouragement in the fight against corruption. When government agencies, different bodies, continents, and countries partner and synergize on collaborative ventures like this, the benefits are enormous. There is no greater way to see government policies in action than this layer of collaboration. Very necessary. I believe that others will explore this kind of synergy to fast-track effort being made toward curbing corruption and achieving overall development across the African continent. Thus, this new synergy on asset recovery and our stolen money and insisting on the return between stakeholders is particularly necessary, as I believe it will spur the development of a framework that will be mutually agreed upon and will have a lasting impact. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the lead presenter and discussant in this lecture have been carefully selected to dissect the issue and formulate a workable strategy for engaging with the issue. I firmly believe that the resolution of this dialogue will undoubtedly create effective multi-stakeholder cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, this synergy has become absolutely necessary because the forces that we are up against are powerful because they have a lot of stolen funds with them and have enormous resources which they are ever willing to deploy in their never-ending effort to frustrate war against corruption. We need the support of everybody. I usually say the best strategy in fighting corruption is to mobilize everybody and let everybody feel that every Nigerian is responsible in the fight against corruption. The mandate, statutory mandate is ours. But I am telling you, every Nigerian has a responsibility in the fight against corruption. That is the only way we can win this fight. We are determined to lead the fight. I take encouragement and inspiration from the presence of all the representatives here, of all the law enforcement agencies, and all the stakeholders, body of professionals, etc., etc.
My name is
And do indeed us all very productive deliberation and welcome to the dialogue. Before I go, I must use this opportunity on behalf of the staff, management staff, and men of the EFCC to extend our heartfelt congratulations to the Secretary to the Federal Government for his well-deserved reappointment. I also want to say the same thing to Madam Mele Kolo Kari for also his recent appointment as the GMD of the NNPC. Before I end, permit me to recognize and also congratulate Lieutenant General Adewusu. You can count the number of Lieutenant General Nigeria has. Congratulations, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming.
That was the acting executive chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, Mr. Ibrahim Mago. Let's appreciate him one more time.
Visibly, corruption is not a victimless crime. Whenever, wherever, however corruption takes place, someone is adversely affected. Corruption's most pronounced effect in Africa is on the continent's security. Africa's economy without corruption will richly integrate the continent, stamp out poverty, and promote economic growth. Papers are now to be presented as prelude to the day's roundtable discussion premised upon asset recovery in Africa.
Ibrahim Mago. Mr. Ibrahim Mago, thank you very much for your address. I was just going to say, it's been around now. I was acting chair. I was reading a few days ago about a plant which will be having its last production of a car known as the Beetle. I'm sure we know what the Beetle is or what the Beetle was. We hardly see it in these parts. And for those who are sufficiently old enough, you recall the advert about the Beetle. You remember the advert? You can't kill the what? The Beetle. So it is with the EFCC. So congratulations, and we wish you the very best. Okay, so we are having a slight alteration to the program of events on account of other exigencies that have arisen with the schedule of the special guest of honor, who is the secretary to the government of the Federation. We're supposed to have goodwill messages now, but we're going to skip those goodwill messages and proceed to invite the special guest of honor to deliver the opening remarks at this round table. Earlier, he was congratulated by the acting chair of the EFCC on his reappointment as the secretary to the government of the Federation. That's Mr. Boss Mustafa. And for those who listened to him when he spoke a few days ago, there might have been a temptation to mistake the statement he made as being self-deprecatory. He said that he was and is the least qualified person to have been reappointed as secretary to the government of the Federation. But if you were to misconstrue it in that light, then of course you will be dead wrong. More than anything else, it was a signification of his modesty. A very senior advocate and solicitor of the Supreme Court of Nigeria, a gentleman, and indeed a quiet and efficient operator. As the cabinet secretary and the coordinator of affairs of government. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome to the podium the secretary to the government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, to deliver his opening remarks.
The acting executive chairman of the EFCC, Mr. Ibrahim Mago, the chairperson of the roundtable discussion, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the Group Managing Director of the NMPC, Malamele Gary, the Managing Director of NDIC, the representative of the Chief of Army Staff, the representative of the Chief of Naval Staff, the representative of the Head of Service of the Federation, discussants, staff of the EFCC, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to stand on the protocol that has, I believe, been established by the Master of Ceremony, but I would not but recognize the presence of the former chairperson of the EFCC. Let me start my comments by truly congratulating Mala Mele Kolokari on his appointment as the Group Managing Director of the NMPC, and also commend him and his team that have decided to attend this roundtable conference that has to do with issues of corruption. His type of organization are not the kind of organization that we want to join in this dialogue because of the obvious role they play in the economy of our nation. But for him to take this bold decision with coming here with his team, I understand there are 11 of his officers that are here with him, says volume of the kind of leadership that we are about to witness in the management of the cash cow of this nation. And also by extension to congratulate Lieutenant General Adeosun for receiving the acknowledgement and also the commendation of the President for the good job that you did in the theater of war and what you're doing even at the headquarters of the armed forces of Nigeria. So gentlemen, thank you for doing a great job. It gives me great pleasure to be part of this event organized to commemorate the third African Union Anti-Corruption Day with the theme towards a common African position on asset recovery. Let me start by expressing my joy that this event is coming at this time when our dear nation, which has been held down by the shackles of corruption for decades, is making steady effort at liberating herself and giving our people a better life. I'm particularly glad that this dialogue is happening now when we are moving to the next level, as it will sharpen the appreciation of the enormity of the problem confronting us and assist in the formulation of the best strategies to deal with them. It is especially gratifying that this dialogue centers on the recovery and forfeiture of our stolen commonwealth from the hands of unpatriotic citizens and institutions that lend themselves as willing tools to steal what is meant for all of us. Some of them serve as conduits to siphon or become safe havens to hide process of corruption. In a number of cases, assist the corrupt to evade justice. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me use this opportunity to thank our anti-corruption agencies led by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, for their unrelenting efforts to trace and recover such stolen assets, and where they are located abroad, to repatriate them to their rightful owners. This has indeed given credence to the anti-corruption fight of the President Muhammadu Buhari administration. It has been recognized the world over that along with prosecution and conviction, the single most effective disincentive to corruption is taken away from the corrupt all stolen and illegally acquired assets. When they do not have the unwholesome benefit of their illicit gains, the corrupt will stop to ask themselves whether investing time, energy, and prodigious talent in the criminal enterprise was really worth it. Let me also, on behalf of President Muhammadu Buhari, thank our African brothers and friends of Nigeria for their understanding and assistance in the fight against corruption. You can see that these efforts are yielding results. Assets are being recovered, and some of the culprits are now behind bars after facing the due legal process. This government is committed to halting the menace of corruption and will continue to build and strengthen institutions to plug leakages. Policies will be developed and enforced to achieve this noble goal, including creating an enabling environment for all Nigerians to strive on a level playing ground. We must be our nation's keeper by saying no to corruption and reporting any act of corruption around us. In the same vein, I wish to call on other countries to diligently enforce their own anti-corruption laundering laws to prevent acceptance of Nigeria's stolen monies and assets into their economies. We expect that where the integrity of their system has been shown to have been compromised, they will work with Nigeria to quickly remedy the situation by intercepting the stolen assets and the criminals and expeditiously repatriating them to Nigeria. The importance of a common African strategy on the recovery and return of stolen assets cannot be overemphasized. African countries must come together to fight this dreaded monster, since we do not only share common history, cultural heritage, and commonalities, but we are also bedeviled at the same time with the yoke of corruption. We cannot afford to continue to work at cross purposes. Now is the time to come under one umbrella because we are stronger together. Nigeria is ready to lead the rest of Africa in the fight against corruption and asset recovery. We are at a crucial juncture in our determination to clean Nigeria and bestow a future worthy of aspiration of our children. The time to act is now. We must stop any corrupt tendencies in their tracks and reclaim our Commonwealth through collective and determined action at the individual, institutional, and governmental levels. It is the hope of Mr. President that this dialogue will come up with improved and sustainable strategies that would make asset recovery and returns become the veritable tool of anti-corruption that it is meant to be. On this note, I wish to declare this dialogue on asset recovery and for future to mark the African Day Against Corruption open. And before I thank you for listening, I would want to commend Mr. Ibrahim Magu and his team for an excellent summit that was conducted as part of the Democracy Day celebration. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful deliberation. Thank you.
That was the special guest of honor, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, delivering his opening remarks and then declaring the roundtable open. Please be seated. Very salient points that he has raised in his opening remarks, and I'm sure that in the course of the conversation, we'll have recourse to analyzing and discussing further in depth the significance of the issues that our special guest of honor has touched on. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we will take 3 goodwill messages before we get into the conversation proper. And the first of those to deliver the goodwill messages will be the newly appointed Group Managing Director of the NNPC, Mr. Mele Kyari. Mr. Kyari, please.
My elder brother and our leader, the Secretary to Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, the Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crime Commission, inshallah, Ibrahim Magu, our father, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, who will lead the panel discussion this afternoon. We thank you for your fatherhood. I think if there's a word like that. And I will stand on existing protocol in the recognition of others. Pardon me to do that. But I will specifically congratulate General Adiosun, now Lieutenant General Adiosun. Gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's no surprise that I'm here with all the executive directors of NNPC. We call them chief operating officers, but they are what Nigerians know as the group executive directors, the first level of leadership in the company. And I'm here also with the cream of the group general managers and managing directors of our subsidiaries, which is the next level of our leadership. And that's no surprise that we are here. First, in the last 3 years, aligned with the persuasions of Mr. President, which is to eliminate corruption, to instill accountability and transparency, that we're completely aligned as a company, and we have done many things. One of them is to automate our processes and systems. And what does that do? Because, Mr. Chairman, you'll agree with me that corruption can only thrive where there is discretion. And automation takes away discretion. Once you take away discretion, there is no corruption. Anybody that collects money from you will only do that or gives you money because he knows you have a discretion. For instance, if a policeman meets you on the road, he has 2 options, either to take you to the station and lock you up, or he gives you something to do. So that's the discretion that he has to say yes or no. So what we did in NNPC is to make sure that we reduce discretion to the barest minimum. And we're also lucky to have a principal, Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, General Muhammad Buhari, President Muhammad Buhari, who has never asked us to do anything in our transaction. He has never sent anyone for us to assist him. He has never asked us to compromise any of our processes. And therefore, for us, this is a huge challenge that we're allowed to be self-accounting. We're accountable to this country. And therefore, we have no other excuse than to align with this and to deliver on this. And to do this, we internalize all the processes of the Nigerian Extractive Industry Initiative, Transparency Initiative, which is a global phenomenon. And not only that, NNPC is the focal organization for the Open Government Partnership. But I'm sure the Secretary of Government Federation knows this. And what that means is to deepen citizen participation in the activities of organizations such that whatever you're doing is open and transparent to the rest of the citizens. And doing that means making things open, making that transparent so that, the issues of corruption become very secondary and they will vanish on their own. And to this end, a number of state governments have joined this initiative. For instance, Kaduna, Kano, Anambra, Enugu, Abia, Niger, Ebonyi, Jigawa, Edo, Adamawa, and very lately Cross River State. What that means is that citizens will now have a say. And once citizens have say in your transactions, then corruption becomes minimized. It's not going to be eliminated. Mr. Chairman, I assure you, the NNPC is completely aligned with the objectives of this government. We will work with the EFCC wherever anybody has stolen anything from us. And we have any data, we will support you, we will aid you. It's in our best interest as the national oil company to make sure that we work transparently, we become accountable to all of this country, and that ultimately the benefit of the oil and gas industry will be available to all of the citizens. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Please let's appreciate Mr. Melia Kiari one more time, newly appointed Group Managing Director of the NNPC. Several takeaways from those very brief remarks in his goodwill message. Corruption thrives where there's discretion. Take away discretion and a major loophole is blocked. And NNPC, as a national oil corporation, will do what is right. And just before we invite the next goodwill message, let me just play back part of what he said, that President Muhammadu Buhari, as President Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and Minister of Petroleum Resources, has never asked the NNPC, the country's national oil corporation, to do this or to do that. Are you surprised? Are you surprised? Okay, now for those who might be a bit reluctant, I was trying to recall the title of the magazine. 30 years ago this year, we all know Professor Tom David West. He's still alive at the University of Ibadan, senior citizen now. He granted an interview to that magazine. And he said in that interview that while he was Minister of Petroleum, under then Major General Muhammadu Buhari, as head of state, General Buhari never sent a note to him, never sent anyone to him 30 years ago. Play back the tape today. Mele Kyari, new GMD of NNPC, has indicated that the same behavioral pattern persists. Let me now invite the Chief of Army Staff, here represented by the Chief of Training, Major Lieutenant General Lamidi Adeosun, to deliver his goodwill message.
The special guest of honor of this very important occasion, and the person of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, who has just taken a walk, the Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crime Commission, the lead discussant for today's program, in the person of our revered Professor Ibrahim Gambari. I want to crave your indulgence to humbly stand on the already well-established protocol. I'm here this morning representing the Chief of Army Staff. And whatever I say here that is correct belongs to him. Whatever I say here that is wrong, I take responsibility. There are so many cliches that have been repeated, some of them direct from our president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces, President Muhammadu Buhari. If we don't kill corruption, corruption is going to kill us. I want to say, within my little knowledge inside our dear country, Nigeria, I think if we want to assist ourselves, assist the government, support the agencies that are fighting officially corruption, all of us must get involved right from home. The part of the country where I come from, there's a saying that only when you don't have the authority to send a child to buy kose for you, that is when you say, go and buy the kose and come, I'll give you part of it. If right from home, we all start stopping all this, before you send your child on a message, you give him or her sweet. Hey, go and do this, take this sweet. Corruption has started. When next he or she is to do the same thing, he will expect you to give him sweet. If you are in an office and you don't accept bribe, and you want anything done officially, you don't present yourself in a way that somebody will say until you do this. Or when they say you must do this, you ask question, why should I do that? So, change, next level, doesn't belong to the government. All of us are government. It belongs to all of us. So all of us must develop that capacity individually and collectively to fight corruption in our dear country. It has been said by the chairman that corruption has all the powers and tentacles to fight back. But if you want to go very fast, you can go alone. But when you go collectively, you go very far. And that will be my own message, that it is all of us that you fight corruption, and not only the government-appointed agencies. Until all of us do that, we will only be begging the question. I think on this note, let me stop here so that I don't take more of our time. I want to thank you very, very immensely for giving the Chief of Army Staff opportunity to attend this occasion and also to explain that he really wanted to be here, but unfortunately, exigence of duty took him outside Abuja since yesterday. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, General Lamidi Adeosun, delivering a goodwill message on behalf of the Chief of Army Staff. Indeed, these are battle-toughened generals who have had the privilege and honor of serving the rest of us and ensuring that the rest of us are kept safe from the battle lines with the terrorists and indeed other emerging battle lines in the country. Once again, let's appreciate the Chief of Army Staff and indeed all the services and paramilitary services that are here this morning now getting into afternoon. All right, we're now getting into the roundtable discussion proper. And we are going to invite the panelists. We're going to invite the panelists who will be part of this conversation. But of course, there is a chairman for the roundtable, where there is a lead presenter, and then we have the discussants. The chairman for the roundtable is a former Minister of External Affairs. That's what we used to call it at the time, now known as Foreign Affairs, and that was between 1984 and 1985, at the time that General Buhari was also Nigeria's head of state. He's a distinguished scholar, diplomat, an international civil servant, and he's also served as the first Under Secretary General and Special Advisor to the United Nations Secretary General on Africa from 1999 to 2005. And his teaching career at home and abroad has seen him through City University of New York, Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria, Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, Georgetown University, and Howard University. He is co-chair of the Albright Gambari Commission, formerly known as the Commission on Global Security, Justice, and Governance, which was set up by the Hague Institute for Global Justice and the Stimson Center to consider new frameworks for collective action on a number of issues, including state fragility, which can often be occasioned by mindless corruption. The chairman is the founder and chair also of the board of directors of the Savannah Center for Diplomacy, Democracy, and Development. In January 2017, he was appointed a member and is currently deputy chairperson of the panel of eminent persons of African peer review mechanism. University administrator, pioneer chancellor of Kwara State University, and indeed a recipient of several honors at home and abroad. At home, he holds the honor of the Commander of the Federal Republic. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Professor Ibrahim Gambari. The distinguished lecturer for the roundtable is a polymath who teaches across three disciplines: political science, international relations, and law. He's an expert consultant in financial and economic law, focusing on, among others, international capital markets, forensic financial investigation, financial crime, bank corporate governance, foreign investment, among others. He has also had the privilege of teaching at home and abroad, and is currently at the Afe Babalola University in Ado-Ekiti. Among the universities where he has taught are those that are located in the UK and East Europe, in Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. He's a graduate of the University of London, where he earned his Bachelor of Laws and also an LLM, that's Master of Laws with a distinction in financial and economic law. And of course, he earns the reputation also of having a Master's in International Relations and a PhD in political science. He's worked as a consultant in international development for the past quarter century, that's 25 years, serving in various countries around the world. His publications have appeared in several reputable journals in law, political science, and international relations. He's a principal at Chico Chambers, attorneys with offices in Lagos, Abuja, and London. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our distinguished lecturer, Dr. Tayo Oke. Dr. Tayo Oke, please. Did he step out? Dr. Tayo Oke? Or maybe he was hiding himself at the rear. I think he's walking his way. Gafara, Gafara. Make way. Dr. Tayo Oke, once again, let's appreciate him. The discussants for the roundtable include a newspaper columnist, an anti-corruption activist, convener of intellectuals and journalists against corruption, that is IJAC. He's a social scientist, communication expert, author, and good governance advocate and campaigner, and is a member of the board of trustees of CACOL. That's the foremost NGO working in the anti-corruption field. And at some point, he was chair of the technical committee of the Anti-Corruption Revolution, anchor of the EFCC. He's a long-time anti-corruption volunteer and ardent supporter of anti-corruption efforts in Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Chief Dr. Ray Murphy, one of our discussants. Ray Murphy, all right, he's emerging from the other side of the hall. The other discussants include the following. I'm not sure, do we have all of them in the hall? The Reverend David Ugolo, if he's around. David Ugolo. Soji Apampa. Okay, there's the other discussant that we are introducing at this time is the current Deputy Director of the Nigerian Office of MacArthur Foundation, and he earlier worked with the British Council on economic matters as well as natural resources. He earned his Master's in Business Administration from Olabisi Onabanjo University in Ogun State, and also received a Master of Arts in Development Studies with a major in Public Policy and Management from the Institute of Social Studies at The Hague, and is an associate of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICANN. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Mr. Dayo Olaide. Mr. Olaide, please. Right, I guess it's making its way right up to the podium. We will sort out the other matters going forward. Mr. Chairman, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, we're running against time, but of course we are handing over to you now to moderate the session, beginning, of course, with your remarks and an invitation to the guest lecturer to deliver his lecture, and thereafter you would moderate the discussion by the two discussants whom we have so far, and then take questions and answers and comments from the floor. Mr. Chairman, sir.
In absentia, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, the Acting Chairman of the EFCC, my namesake, Ibrahim Magu, the former Chairperson of the EFCC, I can always say my younger sister, Madam Farida Waziri. That's the privilege of the elders. The NNPC brand new GMB, Group Managing Director GMD, Kolo Kiari in absentia, representative of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Adeosun, congratulations to him, representatives of the other service chiefs, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and privilege to be invited to chair this unique occasion, and I thank my namesake and the acting chairman of the EFCC for championing this war against corruption. It's a unique war because it is a war where there's no alternative to victory. The war against corruption is a war for which we must win. I also want to thank the new NNPC Group Managing Director who has given me a new title among all the others that I've been privileged to hold he has given me the title of the fatherhood, which is a double-edged sword. The unparalleled determination of this administration to succeed in the fight against corruption, including the determination to retrieve from abroad and at home the huge mind-boggling monies which were stolen for our country's commonwealth, is truly commendable. Therefore, as has been said before me, we must give our support to the government while we insist as a people to a permanent end to impunity and zero tolerance for official corruption in Nigeria. You must recall that when President Muhammadu Buhari was a candidate for president in 2015, one of the major planks they ran on was the manifesto of the APC, was the fight against corruption. And the fact that he was returned must be due in part to the fact that the Nigerian people felt he has done well on that front, and that they want him to continue even with renewed vigor. So we must join him in reversing the inheritance of poor governance, which has deeply contributed to and continues to endanger peace and security, justice, transparency, employment, and development. And the efforts of our president has been recognized in Africa by making him the champion of anti-corruption struggle in our continent. In this regard, we may recall that the African leaders hosted a high-level dialogue on winning the fight against corruption, leveraging on international cooperation to achieve sustainable development in Africa at the margins of the 73rd session of the 2018 United Nations General Assembly. The program was aimed at mobilizing African people in the to combat and eradicate corruption, which is the cause and facilitator of illicit financial flow, IFF, and its murderous effects on the continent. As chairman of this important dialogue and roundtable, I want to make just 6 main points, very briefly. The first is that increased success in meeting the challenges of corruption facing Nigeria, or indeed any nation, cannot be achieved by one person alone, whatever its antecedents and deep commitment may be. Therefore, the people must take ownership of the fight against corruption. And when we Nigerians are united, we win. And that is why we win this war against corruption. But to do so, we know that President Buhari is the flag bearer of the fight against corruption. But where are the other flag bearers in the states, 36 states? Where are the flag bearers of the fight against corruption in the local governments? Where are the flag bearers of the fight against corruption in the government agencies? And that's why I feel so gratified, as we must also be, that the new GMD of NNPC has come up to say he wants to be a flag bearer. And we must give him the encouragement that he needs. And civil societies, groups, NGOs, non-state actors, traditional rulers, community leaders, religious leaders must also become flag bearers. And guess who must also be the flag bearer of this fight against corruption? Is the nation's elite, because they have to decide whether they want to continue to be part of the problem or part of the solution. The second is that the institution of governance, many of them playing dual role and complementary role in nation and state building, we need to be reinvigorated so as to serve as the bedrocks they were meant to be in the administration of public affairs. So the people of Nigeria, the leadership of Nigeria at all levels, but also the institutions of governance. And that's why the EFCC takes a primary role and a major role in leading us, but they must also lead other institutions in the fight against corruption. Third, in the fight against corruption, we must complement the arrest and punishment of corrupt officials with a revamped national reward system. It's not all Nigerians that are corrupt. In fact, there are many hardworking, incorruptible people. We must reward them so that we have a system of reward and punishment in order to discourage corruption. Because in the fight against corruption in Nigeria, it's not just about arresting and jailing people who are corrupt, but as a means of prevention, the certainty of punishment, the certainty of recovery of stolen assets, and the reward for those who are not corrupt. Fourth, in commemorating the third African Anti-Corruption Day, close attention needs to be paid to the measures and steps that will need to be taken to overcome grinding poverty and want among Africans, especially Nigerians. Because the more inequality grows, the scourge of growing youth unemployment, all these are ills, poverty, that we must address as complementary to the fight against corruption. Fifth point, this panel needs to address the issue of the values and norms and customs as a nation and examine factors that promote insatiable anger for wealth and corruption. In this regard, massive and effective campaign strategy should be launched to directly change the perception of the general citizenry to corruption for the purpose of constructing a viable and progressive policy. The idea is that government is there. It belongs to nobody. We have to end it. Government is, in many ways, all of us. I think it was an American president, Harry Truman, who put it. He says, we have a responsibility to act together as a nation, not only for our contemporaries, but also for future generations. A responsibility to preserve resources that belongs to them, as well as to us, and without which none of us can survive. Six, the efforts to locate and repatriate stolen money require aggressive push as well as collaboration with foreign countries. The scale of fraudulent transfer of our resources abroad has been identified in a report of the African Union High-Level Panel on Illicit Financial Flows, headed by the former President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa, and shows that Africa has been losing annually through illicit financial flows. Those monies are more than what the continent receives in development aid. So those governments who are proud to list the amount of money they give to us in aid should also have another index of pride, which is the amount of money they have returned, which have been stolen and deposited in their respective countries. Because if you look at the scale, according to another report by the Global Financial Integrity, a Washington-based research and advocacy organization, published in 2012, Africa lost about 854 billion US dollars in illicit financial flows from 1970 through 2008. Of this, Nigeria tops 4 other countries with United States dollars 89.5 billion as the highest outflow, followed by Egypt, followed by Morocco, and South Africa. We must use all the legal instruments and multilateral institutions such as the UN to recover those looted funds. I don't want to continue, otherwise, all these discussants, I'll get them out of business. And they are my young colleagues. Therefore, I just want to end by commending the EFCC for organizing this important national conversation. It cannot be one-off. We have to have several conversations at all levels. But I'm happy that they have hosted this very first one to start us off. And it's my privilege to be, to call now on the lead, to lead discussion. Maybe I should leave that also to our MC. To call them the lead discussant so that he can start us off rolling. And he's free to ignore all the things I have said. But I hope that he won't. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa, the Acting Chairman of the Economic and Financial Commission, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, I'd like to extend my gratitude to you personally for extending this invitation to me to address this distinguished audience today. Mr. Chairman, please permit me to simply stand on all the other established protocols. And before I launch straight into my presentation, please can I just say one or two words about Mr. Chairman for today's occasion. His presence here caught me entirely by surprise because we date back several years, worked across several projects around the world. He is my mentor, my father, my guardian, my everything. I adore him. His presence alone caused me a little bit of destabilization, but I'm trying to recover myself. And let me just mention very quickly, when I wrote my first book in 1999, I enlisted him to write the foreword to the book, which was quaintly entitled Radicalism and Foreign Policy in Nigeria and all the rest of it. And I felt it was appropriate to choose him to write the foreword. But that was met with opera from my left-leaning political colleagues in London at the time, one of whom told me, if you select Professor Gambari to write the foreword, I will never read the book. And I said, why? He said, he's no longer the firebrand that we knew him to be. And I said, but that's because he's a diplomat now. And he said, well, it should still be firebranding. It should still be shouting from the rooftop, even from his position as a diplomat. But in fact, Professor has been consistent with his principles and convictions, but employing a completely different mode of communication within the diplomatic community. Even though he has retired from official responsibility, he obviously has not retired. He's probably even taking more on now than he's ever done before. His commitment to justice and progressive causes has not waned over time. Professor, I salute you. And I'm deeply honored to be sharing this platform with you. Now, I have a confession to make, which is that I rarely get excited about attending conferences. I have attended quite a few in my time, both in this country and abroad. But this particular conference got me very excited because it is not the usual jamboree, professional jamboree, where it is all talk and no action. When I was given the topic for this paper a few days ago, it made me jump for joy, as it is asking us to address ourselves to solutions, not more diagnosis of the problem. So by that very fact, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to engage in abstract discussion of financial crime or how terrible and awful it is on the continent. You, all of you sitting here, already know that. It is said that philosophers have interpreted the world. The task is to change it. Consequently, I am going to adhere strictly to the remit of the topic in front of us by making an unconventional proposal on a procedure for asset recovery capable of application across the continent. I'll let you be the judge on how much sense that makes. My proposal hinges on a view of crime and criminal sanction that is understood by us in Africa, but it is largely alien to a Western audience. It is that in respect of the African elite, and I'm referring especially to PEP, otherwise known as politically exposed persons, engaged in corrupt practices aimed at asset stripping the state, criminal prosecution is futile. Why? Unlike many other criminal behavior, corruption and bribery in particular is almost impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the criminal standard for securing a conviction. Very often, the act of bribery is not something that speaks for itself. It requires the prosecution not only to adduce concrete evidence, but more crucially, to make a value judgment on the conduct of the individual involved. And if the judge hearing the case does not share a similar value to that being employed by the prosecution, the case falls. It is unlike what happens in Western jurisdictions, where the jury hears and assesses the evidence before applying a communal value on the conduct of the defendant. In that respect, a guilty verdict is easier to secure than the non-jury system of justice we have across Africa. Moreover, even where we have a conviction of a PEP, spending time in jail offers no deterrence to those bent on asset stripping the state in Africa. Again, you might ask why? Because the typical PEP in Africa values its property far more than it does its liberty. This sounds rather counterintuitive, but it is true. While a criminal conviction represents a blight on an individual's career in Western jurisdictions, it is almost a badge of honor for a whole number of PEPs in Africa. We often retreat into the sanctuary of ethnicity as a blanket cover for all criminal misdemeanors in our midst. Well, the prosecution is politically motivated. The ethnic coloration of the government in power immediately becomes an issue. We then ask, why is the prosecution only going after people from such and such ethnicity or such and such region and not others? We further ask, yes, such and such may be corrupt, but is he the only one? And by the time we go through all of this, the potency of a criminal conviction has been lost. It no longer symbolizes a collective disavowal of corrupt practices. Unlike what happens in Western jurisdiction, the mere mention of a PEP's name and crime in the same line is enough to tarnish the individual for life. Several African presidents have been indicted at the International Criminal Court in The Hague of late. A couple of years ago, we even had one who voluntarily attended the court in person as the head of state to answer the charges preferred against him. He was acquitted, but the point is, answering criminal charges is not a career-ending phenomenon for us in Africa, as it is very much in Western jurisdictions. Not long ago, a former Senate president of a major African country was not only accused of a very serious case of graft, but was put in the dock for trial. He went through the hoops in his official capacity as Senate president without batting an eyelid. So, ladies and gentlemen, when our counterparts in Western institutions put pressure on us in Africa to apply even stiffer criminal sanctions on corrupt officials, we should ask, to what end? Our apparent tolerance of high-level corruption in Africa reflects the cynicism we hold of our criminal procedure to deal with such cases fairly. It also acts back to the pre-independent struggle of our nationalist leaders, who went to jail severally, many later moving from criminal convictions to becoming heads of state, straight from prison in some cases. In those days, going to prison was not only a badge of honor, it was the rite of passage for political leadership and respectability. Consequently, the novelty of political elites serving jail terms has waned over time in Africa. Another common misconception we need to put to bed quickly is the issue surrounding the definition of PEPs, politically exposed persons, their family and associates, as contained in many international conventions on the issue of official corruption. Family in the West follows bloodline,
In Africa, it does not. Family is a cultural attribute. Labels such as cousins and nephews and nieces and half-sisters, half-brothers have no meaning to the African. We are brothers and sisters simpliciter. I knew my uncle, my own uncle, as dad growing up. It never occurred to me to refer to him as anything other than he was my father. Now, I cannot even count how many kids out there readily claim me as their daddy. You all understand what I am saying. As a corollary to this, our common understanding of what exactly constitutes bribery often leads us astray. Take, for example, a major manufacturer who is perhaps planning, who is making an application, a planning application to build a regional factory in his hometown, and is being considered by the local planning authority. Say he then packs cartons of vintage wine and presents to the head of the planning authority in advance appreciation of the granting of his application. Some would argue this is in tune with African tradition. But nowadays, would that not be viewed as bribery? What about the situation of merger and acquisition? Supposing the company doing the acquisition takes the two negotiating parties on a luxury travel to a holiday resort in the Bahamas, to conclude the negotiations. Well, bribery, that involved Africans, but business expense if it involved Western parties. How about paying an executive millions of dollars in cash to decamp to a rival company along with his team? Well, bribery if it involved Africans, golden handshake if it involved Western parties. And paying a top and influential executive millions of dollars in shares and bonuses for getting rid of him from his position. Well, bribery if it involved Africans, golden parachute if it involved Western parties. And how about giving an executive loads of cash and property worth millions of dollars just for turning up for work? Well, bribery if it involved Africans, and incentives if it involved Western parties. I can go on, but the point I'm making is simply that bribery and corruption have no nationality, no borders, and no identifiable family members. So if criminal sanction and more criminal sanction works well in Western jurisdiction, fine, let that be. A more effective deterrent for us in Africa is to focus on the civil procedure for asset recovery, since a lot of us place more value on our assets than we do our personal liberty. The public opprobrium attached to criminal sanction in Western jurisdictions has no resonance in the African environment, as already pointed out earlier. So let us therefore employ the service of trust law in a creative way that is unique to our situation in Africa. Let me elaborate. We should first of all adopt an Afrocentric definition of a PEP. PEP for us has to be expanded horizontally and vertically. Family in our culture does not follow bloodline. A PEP, therefore, is anyone in contact directly or indirectly with state resources and their associates. Associate here used liberally and in the generic term. We should then move on to assert that there is a relationship of trust between PEPs and the state. This is on a par with the type of relationship that exists between doctor and patient, lawyer, client, employer, employee, pastor and his congregation, etc. So in terms of PEPs, this needs to be enshrined in law. Well, the law of trust is such that a PEP cannot be said to have entered into a trust relationship with the state purely on account of their official position. Nonetheless, it is one that can be imposed by the operation of law. What this means in reality is that although a relationship of trust does not flow naturally between a PEP and the state, it is one that exists just because the law determines that it should. In law, this is known as constructive trust. So what society is saying collectively is simply that when it comes to state resources and its handling by PEPs, they ought to do so on the basis of a trust relationship. State resources are to be handled by PEP in their position as fiduciaries, and therefore only act in the interest of the state and never for their own personal benefit. It is not going to be easy because the relationship of a fiduciary is an onerous one. The fiduciary obligation to its beneficiary, in this case the state, is absolute. It is one of loyalty and unflinching devotion. Not even an innocent mistake will protect a fiduciary. He is made to account for any digression, however minor, from his fiduciary obligations. Let me give an illustration of what I'm saying. Say a top-ranking head of a government agency, for instance, is found to have obtained, say, 100 million naira from a government contractor, some of which he has quickly spent on property, shares, and luxury items, the remainder of which he has deposited in the bank account of a fictitious company that he controls. As it stands, a prima facie case of an inappropriate behavior contrary to his fiduciary obligations is there for us to see. All an anti-corruption agency needs do is simply tap him on the shoulder, show him the evidence of the money he has received from the contractor, and ask him to account for it. There is no burden of proof on the anti-corruption agency to be discharged. There is no presumption of innocence of a crime. There is no proving beyond a reasonable doubt. It is a civil procedure. He, the top official, has the duty to render a complete account of the money. Whatever label we put on the money he received, bribe, kickback, compensation for trouble, thank you gesture, extra gratia payment, whatever, that is irrelevant. It is money that ought to have been handed over to the state the moment it was received. The portion of the money deposited in a bank account can be clawed back immediately. The other portion spent on luxury items, shares, and property can and will be traced, legally traced, to wherever it may have gone to in the world and disgorged. It is not just the simple sum of 100 million naira that the state is interested in at this point. The state is also interested in the interest accrued and whatever value it may have generated meanwhile. Every penny is accounted for, and if it means that the top official having to sell his cherished family home in his village, or even the shirt on his back to render a complete account, so be it. The main weakness, I'm told, of that I know of the current civil forfeiture regime is that it requires a predicate criminal offense to have been committed first. Once the criminal prosecution fails, it is usually open to the defendant to demand the return of the forfeited items, as they are no longer seen to be proceeds of crime in law, in the eyes of the law. The creative use of trust law in this proposal means that no offense is even deemed to have been committed. The official in question need only to have exhibited behavior inconsistent with his fiduciary obligations. In addition, the anti-corruption agency retains the option of a criminal prosecution at any point in the process. A criminal prosecution, of course, suits the PEPs because they have connections in high places, and in addition to their access to the best paid criminal defense attorneys in the land, not to talk of generally lopsided judicial systems. The question being asked mostly by colleagues in the West is that this type of civil remedy option is somewhat draconian, and it looks like an attempt to circumvent the safeguards provided by criminal procedure. What I say to them is simply this: you think civil remedy proposed here is draconian? Then why not try being a prosecutor in Africa? Even if it is indeed draconian, ladies and gentlemen, we have little time to waste on botched prosecutions and everlasting adjournments. Desperate times demand desperate measures. Our gathering here today is a testament to our collective will to tackle the seemingly intractable problem of asset recovery, hidden away on our shores and beyond. We should remain unshakable in our resolve that stolen African assets will be recovered with interest until the idea of asset stripping the state in Africa is no longer profitable for those who dedicate themselves to doing it. Finally, Mr. Chairman, we should also be steadfast in our resolve to halt the spate of fruitless, cumbersome, and extremely expensive criminal prosecution of looters as a first option. And let us focus instead on the loot, first and foremost. Was it not Einstein who said in his wisdom that the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result? So in choosing this alternative path, we shall no doubt encounter a lot of setbacks, fightbacks from looters, backstabbing, backsliding, backlash, and all the other similarly disconcerting backs you can think of. But let me end by recalling another great mind in history, Victor Hugo, who said, "There's only one thing stronger than all the armies in the world. That is an idea whose time has come." I rest my case. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for listening.
Like many other regions around the world, Africa is prone to various forms of illicit trafficking, embezzlement of public funds, and corruption. The growing sophistication of criminal networks, combined with insufficient resources and expertise of investigators, are some of the many reasons and obstacles that make it difficult to quell this financial crime. Today's roundtable discussion has handed in prospects of discouragement from crimes, deterrent, forfeiture, and outright recovery of assets. Where this leads the continent going forward remains to be seen. Thank you for staying tuned. The program is still on.
I'm also very privileged to be seated next to Professor Gambari, who I have a lot of respect for as well. I think I should also start by commending EFCC for convening this important meeting. What I'll try to do is essentially to share some of my views and reflections based on the paper as presented. So with the kind permission of the chair of the panel, and of course, members of the panel, I'd like to sit now, not stand, on the existing protocol. Yes, sir. I think we are all clear on the crisis of corruption in the country. Practically all the agencies that have been acknowledged and recognized here acknowledge and probably also struggle with the problem of corruption. I'm very excited to see Madam Dr. Mrs. Farida Waziri, and I'll refer to one of the things that she said a couple of years back, to say that during an interview, 1,000 DFCC alone will not and cannot deal with the problem of corruption. Essentially, what she's saying matches what in the 6-point agenda the chair had also reiterated, which is that only a collective action is required to be able to make a dent on the problem of corruption as we find it in Nigeria today. Now, in direct response to the paper that was presented, and please, you will have opportunity to correct my understanding. My understanding of the paper as presented is basically saying, look, Africans, and I will start from the part that I agree with you, sir. I agree with you to the extent that for so many years we have gone after the corrupt persons, the corrupt people. And we have not succeeded. And therefore, it is time for us to rethink our strategy and begin to go after the corrupt proceeds. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with your point that we also need to find an Africa-centric methodology, however you choose to disaggregate that, for us to be able to deal with this problem. But I think that my first reaction to that conclusion is the fact that even as Africa, we are part of a global world. And therefore, in finding Africa-centric solutions to our problems, we need to acknowledge the commitments and the responsibilities that we also owe to the rest of the world. An approach that we may call African-centric, but which violates the fundamental rights of any persons everywhere. I think we can already predict what will likely be the reaction of the world. So, for purposes of illustration, and I'm sure 80% of those in this room will agree with me, democracy has not worked for the majority of Nigerians. But we cannot, for that reason, say that we should dispense with democracy and find something else to replace democracy. In spite of all its challenges and all its deficits, globally, there is an acknowledgement that democracy is probably the best form of government. Therefore, in my opinion, my first reaction will be that any anti-corruption regime that fails to cover prevention, prosecution, and recovery is just a non-starter. Therefore, my addition to what you are proposing here, sir, will be that even as we go after the criminal proceeds, we must as well pay and continue to pay attention to the strategies and the structures and the institutions that help us to be able to, in the first place, stop corruption or prevent it, prosecute those who are corrupt, and then as well also recover stolen assets. I think that is very fundamental. The second point, which is related to that, is in the US, I just did a quick search. In the US, almost 90 to 95% of criminal cases are plea bargained. In this part of the country, or this part of the world, plea bargain remains alien to us, in spite of the possible benefit that it can bring to the fight against corruption in this part of the world. So as we think about the fight against corruption, I think one of the things that government and in fact the entire community fighting against corruption must come to the common understanding and begin to interrogate further how we can better use plea bargaining, because it ties to what you are proposing. What plea bargaining simply says is, look, you have done this. If we have to go the whole hog, it may take us this time, but you are likely to end up spending a lifetime in a jail. But if you will return the monies that have been stolen, we will let you go. Or even if you will return an X amount or X percentage of what has been stolen, we will let you go. But again, I then ask, how much of the infrastructures that we need to be able to have a functional plea bargain is in place in Nigeria? Part of the reasons why 95% of the cases can be settled plea bargain in the US will be that they trust that the legal system is strong enough. They trust that the institutions have the capacity, and they also have the temperament to monitor you, to follow you, to trace you. So it becomes extremely difficult. In fact, you are likely to even say to yourself, I think it's likely in my best interest to actually enter into a plea bargain. In the case of Nigeria, it's not exactly the case. A recent report that was released by SERAP, Socioeconomic Rights Accountability Project, identified that 80% of high-profile cases that have failed is due to reasons associated with our judicial system. Gag laws that are released by the courts, non-compliance with the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. So, we are not going to introduce a system that completely ignores and is operating aside these challenges that we have. Therefore, my conclusion will be that in introducing what you have proposed, sir, and in strengthening plea bargain as an important part of our laws, the weaknesses that we have in the administration of criminal justice system in the country will remain relevant to it, and therefore we must continue to pay attention to it. One last comment, sir. In a lot of African states, you ask the question, who are the biggest beneficiaries of the corruption enterprise in the country, in the continent? They are the same political leaders at the forefront or the vanguard of the fight against corruption. Part of the reason why the laws, domestic laws, continue to fail is because they can quite easily politicize the fight against corruption and therefore find escape routes. So my own final submission will be that something similar to the International Criminal Court system that is able to complement and to reinforce the fight against corruption is what the continent needs. Something that makes it difficult for corrupt or what you refer to as politically exposed persons to find any form of safe haven in any part of Africa. I think that is the very fundamental starting point that we need to pay attention to. If they escape domestic laws, there is an international or continental law or continental court that is able to go after them, recover the assets, and make it difficult for them to find any safe haven wherever they may hide. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that contribution in the tradition of a discussant. So I give the floor now to, whom did I say? Chief Dr. Ray Murphy.
Thank you very much. As my friend has just said, I'd like to sit on existing protocols. I'd have loved to stand because I used to be a teacher, but the rules here means I should sit. Having said that, I'd like to point you to the current motto of the EFCC, which says, "Together against corruption." We cannot allow corruption to become a duty of the EFCC, the anti-corruption effort to become a duty of the EFCC or of the ICPC or of the armed forces. We cannot, because corruption has become such a cankerworm in society that it is absolutely necessary that we all own that effort. And that is the issue of our values. What are our value systems? Why is it that we find it a little bit easy to condone corruption and very difficult to condone petty theft? We lynch people that have stolen phones, and we salute our people that have stolen hundreds and hundreds of millions. The simple fact is that we should begin to ask ourselves, have we begun to actually transit from hostility to governance to ownership of governance? In our local societies, in our villages, we know that no man can own the stream and no man can own the market. We all know that. And the stream is our collective, just as government is our collective. The market is our collective, just as CBN is our collective and NNPC is our collective. How come we do not have the same kind of ownership that allows us to insist that anybody who is dealing with the stream or dealing with NNPC must deal with it with a collective communal consciousness. There is a reason why the EFCC and other agencies should look carefully at the concept of communicating corruption properly in the context of the citizenry. Having said that, one of the reasons why corruption seems to stagnate, prosecutions and recovery, is like, as the last person said, the politically active, what you call politically exposed persons, who are at the apex of society, are the ones who are mainly corrupt. Let's call that spade a spade. They own the corruption. They own the instruments of coercion. And it's very dangerous to have those two concentrated in the same sector of persons. I'd like to disagree with Dr. K on the matter of prosecution. First of all, the assets, the funds, the process of corruption is the very fuel that fuels more corruption. So the first and most important thing is confiscation and recovery. That is a given. Because you cannot leave me, assuming I were a thief or a corrupt person, and then you leave me the capacity to be more corrupt because I have all the funds in me with me. So the first thing is we must look at recovery. Without jailing, without prosecution, how do we stigmatize corruption? Stigmatizing corruption can only be achieved by convictions. When you convict people, you shame them. We call it naming and shaming. But this time, the judicial process has shamed, has named, therefore can shame. We cannot ever envisage a process that says, just give me what you took and go to your house. That will make a nonsense of everything we know about punishment and reward systems in society. In sociology, it is very clear that all biological organisms move towards rewards and move away from pain. So we should use convictions and enforcement of those convictions as punishment so that people move away from corruption. Now, one of the reasons why it's difficult for African countries to come together to pursue singular objectives such as this is, first of all, our colonial heritage. There are different jurisdictions with different philosophies. Again, I look at African society, all of Africa, we are victims of corruption. Because most of what is taken out of Africa, as Professor Gambari has eminently said, is taken out of Africa. I don't see people taking money from Nigeria to Ghana. If it goes to Ghana, it's maybe 0.5% of what is taken out. I don't see people taking money from here to Gambia. All of Africa is a victim of corruption. All of us in Africa are victims of corruption. And then the political leadership of Europe and the Americas, in giving this lip service against corruption, received through their banking systems these billions of naira taken from Africa. Therefore, it becomes necessary for us as a continent to develop a capacity to insist that those monies taken out of Africa be returned to Africa. Beyond that, we all know that asset stripping cannot occur except there are receivers of stolen goods. We are suffering in Africa because people take out these resources and there are people who are willing to receive them. I am sitting here with a long experience on this effort. And the major factor is the fact that the judicial processes has not allowed for speedy conviction of individuals. When there is speedy, I can say there are many cases today that are 10 years old, 15 years old in the courts. And we're talking about billions of naira, billions of people's money, billions of money that can do a lot. In researching to come here, this morning, it's very clear that even though there are arguments about volume, but we're dealing with about $200 billion per annum outflow out of Africa. 200 billion, sorry, take it again, $200 billion per annum. By 2002, it was calculated at 150 billion. By 2002. Now, I imagine that one hospital in one local government area, well equipped, at that level, not referral hospital, approximately $1 million. I imagine that one school, one good school, well equipped for today's world, approximately $1 million. So if we deal with $20 billion, we're dealing with 2,000 schools. We're dealing with 200 schools. So I want you to situate this cost of corruption so you can feel the impact that we feel about corruption. Africa must get together. We must dismantle the differences in jurisdictions. I do know, for instance, for a matter of fact, that the major reason why we cannot come together, like I said, is because of the influence of other nations, different jurisdictions. Sorry, please. Different jurisdictions. So, going forward, value system change, support to the anti-corruption agencies, The anti-corruption agencies themselves should welcome volunteers. They should not look at people who come to volunteer as if they are coming to meddle. They shouldn't look at that. In my roundup, Africa loses a lot to corruption. We lose schools, we lose hospitals, we lose roads, we lose opportunities. We should encourage those who are doing good. We should encourage those who are doing good. But we should make sure that we adequately punish those who are stealing our collective lives, our collective progress, our collective futures from the rest of us. Finally, we should all come together to support the anti-corruption efforts of the agencies. Thank you very much. Is that? Okay. That's for you. Okay, the next one.
The next speaker is Mr. Soji Akpampa, who will be followed as our last discussant, Mr. Olariwaju Suraj. And in order to allow time for discussion, I'm only giving them 10 minutes or less. So you get an award, the Gambari Award, if you have less than 10 minutes.
I did less than 10.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, I'll just go through, because quite a lot of points have been put on the table. I agree that we cannot just isolate the issue of civil forfeiture on its own. We need a well-rounded strategy. So I'd like to agree with Dio that we need to work especially on prevention, because you find out that regime after regime, the number of cases, they just keep adding more and more cases. The cases are not reducing because they're not being resolved. So except if we're saying the faucet is broken, the water is rushing out, the logical thing is just to close the faucet. Just repair it. Just turn it off. Turn the source off. Then you can deal with all the water that has flowed out, and you can try and catch your breath again on what is happening. Otherwise, none of the agencies that we have will be able to do it. And I'm coming back to the crux of your paper, sir. I agree that we should look into plea bargaining and have a proper framework for that, because we know even that process can be abused. I think that anti-corruption work cannot be the preserve of the anti-corruption agencies. I agree with that completely, because if it is not owned by society, we're all left as spectators looking at what is happening, and if it's not owned, it's not driven from within, the next set of corrupt people will still come from society. So except it is driven by a change within society, you will not stop the supply of the corrupt people. So it's very important that we have that. I agree with the paper that it's probably good for us to look at a different definition for politically exposed persons, because the way it manifests in Africa is different. I also think that, as you have said, taking the view of the politically exposed person as a fiduciary is a very important step that should not be thrown away at all. I think it has a lot of merit, and it gives an opportunity to change the strategy in terms of how you do your prosecutions. That it's not everything that has to be a criminal prosecution. I agree with you that it's not either or, that you can start with the civil forfeiture because you want to take back as much as you want, but the framework should be such that it does not rule out your ability to also then go for criminal proceedings after you have disgorged the particular person from what it is that they have taken. Your paper asks why we cannot secure a guilty verdict against the PEP. You know, why does serving a jail term not really serve as a deterrent? The polarization of public opinion, and so on and so forth. But the question, the fundamental question we're not asking is why. The real reason why is because we have not changed the way our lawyers emerge. How do you become a senior advocate? We have not looked at how our judges emerge. How do you become a judge in an appellate court or in the Supreme Court? We have not really asked how our leaders emerge. Because if you don't know how your leaders emerge, and you're surprised that even these amendments you want to make to the Proceeds of Crime Act, it's the same sort of people who will be caught by this act who have to preside over deciding the contents of the act. So I think a very fundamental issue is our going back to understand how these people emerge. So I can see our chairman is looking at me very passionately, and it's not because he likes me. So I think I will rest my case here. Thank you very much.
Actually, I like you. But I would want to move the conversation forward and now call on Mr. Olariwaju to please round up as briefly as possible, because we want to give the audience a chance to react to what we have been saying.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. I would just try to do a bit of a quick run through based on practical experience beyond both with the paper and also outside the paper. And I'm going to flow from the last discussion by my brother, Mr. Sojia Pampa. I think there are lots of whys that we need to ask. It is not just going to go this way. So it's very easy for us to be outside and say, oh, go after that money. Oh, you should have gotten that money. Oh, it's taking 5 years. But you need to be there. I would want us to give another round of applause for EFCC. You know, I'm not looking at just this program, but it is one of a few of the agencies that has actually been involved in asset recovery. And as Nigeria is, we have actually only recovered less than 10%. I should even say less than 5% of our stolen assets. And the process of recovery can take years. So this is where your why is very relevant. Why were those money looted in the first place? It is the failure of all of us. I am guilty, you are all guilty, and we are all guilty. So we must start a process of holding ourselves accountable. accepting our failure. A president emerged in this country with almost bankrupt accounts balance. And he left office with presidential library, an international standard university, presidential mansion, international mechanized farm, and we're not asking questions. Which resources were used for that? Where did that come from? These are the questions of the wise that we must ask. And when we're talking about stolen asset recovery, I would disagree with you a little. Until I was reading a decree in 1998-99 by the Abdul Salam regime, I would also have agreed earlier that you don't have stolen assets within the sub-region. But unfortunately, the former late President Abacha had 40% investment in the total value of Sierra Leone's refinery. It was not an assumption. It was forfeited to the country after he died. Ghana, prior to the last election, presidential election here in February 2019, lost about 3 cedis to the value of the cedis in Ghana, because Nigerians who have stolen money and kept in Ghana moved those money out prior to the election to come and buy votes and influence the electoral process here. And the fact still remains that we can't afford a situation where we elevate corruption to a state of heart. We have almost all embraced corruption. So the people who would steal more than enough, because the more you steal, the less chances of you being prosecuted. So you can buy the best judges, you can frustrate the process. Unfortunately for all of us, they can also have the best of social gatherings. You will see the weddings, and it will be going into hundreds of millions, and we will join them in celebrating, even when they were in court, answering charges to cases bordering on corruption and misappropriation of resources. It is not going to be a situation where, and this is also going to be a challenge to EFCC, it's going to be a challenge to the other law enforcement agency and this government. It's not going to be just probing those who are dead and just dealing with Abacha. And that's why I said you should clap for EFCC, because EFCC, and more than any other agency, succeeded in recovering from Desiani. Last week, about $40 million worth of jewelries were forfeited by just one person in office. We can't pretend that we didn't know that that person was accumulating those assets illegally. But because we have embraced corruption, we see them in our churches, we clap for them. We see them in mosques, we stand up for them. We see them in traditional gatherings, we celebrate them. Then they go on stealing this, and we're promoting the complete erosion of our values, culture, and tradition. So going after recovery of assets, it must be a process. And it is not just going to be non-official based asset. It must be an inclusion of all of us that are here. The downtrodden who collects 5 naira, 10 naira. They look at some of us who are the middle class. The ones in political office, they also need to sometimes graduate some of us to agree with them before they succeed. So the guilty ones many times are not the ones who are stealing the money. It is those of us who keeps quiet when they are doing it. I thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Well, please give our panelists and discussants a round of applause. Since I'm described as the father, therefore an old man, I therefore forget easily. I've written down copiously what they have said. I want to summarize very briefly, just to permit people to now ask questions or respond relative to what was actually said, not what was imagined to have been said. Our lead panelists began by saying that philosophers have analyzed the world but the more important challenge is how to change the world. So you can continue to analyze, but ultimately it's what you do to correct whatever anomalies we have observed. And in his presentation, he drew attention to the fact that when you go to criminal prosecution, corruption is difficult to prove. And therefore, we have to find another way of dealing with the corrupt using maybe community efforts, the cultural values, and civil prosecution. I don't think he meant either or, but that maybe we should take another close look at civil prosecution, because the novelty of politically exposed persons, big men going to jail, is wearing off. But nonetheless, what he concluded by saying is that we're in a desperate situation. So much resources are flowing out, and therefore desperate situation requires desperate measures. So we must look for desperate measures to deal with this terrible scourge that we have. And that I think the point he made, that if you continue to do the same thing the same way and you expect a different result or outcome, it will not work. In fact, it's a form of insanity. And therefore, anti-corruption being an idea whose time has come is greater than all the armies of this world, according to Victor Hugo, and therefore we must seize the moment. Dayo Olaide, who was the first recipient of the Gambari Award for brevity, congratulations, and sat on existing protocol, he said that we should rethink our strategies, because if it's just about going after persons and not a comprehensive strategy, we are not going to succeed. And that, yes, Afrocentric approach may work, but we are part of the world. So we must adjust all our strategies to take account of the larger world. That's why, by the way, by way of digression, in my one of my former tasks, I was President Buhari's foreign minister. We developed a concept of concentric circles of foreign policy, that we begin at home, then our neighbors, then Africa, and the rest of the world. Similarly, I would suggest that approach is relevant to recovery of assets and to pursuit of our anti-corruption strategies. He also said that in the US, 95% of criminal cases are resolved through pre-bargaining. Maybe we should, that's something we can learn there. However, he says that must be accompanied by very strong institutions, such as the judiciary and the legal system. But the last point he made was that the beneficiaries of corruption are often those who are the ones shouting loudest against anti-corruption. And that's why it's often said that if you go to a funeral, a man died, and there's a woman who is not the wife of the deceased, who is shouting louder, crying louder than the bereaved, you have to be very suspicious. You have to be very suspicious. So when you see among those people who are crying loudest about anti-corruption, watch them. If you scratch deeply, you may very well find they are also among the beneficiaries. Chief Ray Murphy said rightly that the EFCC has duty, we must not consign the duty of fighting corruption to EFCC alone. And we Nigerians, we tend to do that. We think somebody else should do it. You know, so if we have a bad government, let the military take over. We find out that's not the answer. You know, Buhari comes into power, let Buhari deal with anti-corruption. Well, it will not work, because, you know, if it is not the collective efforts of our people, it will definitely not work. And that the point he also made was that we have to transit to the ownership of government, ownership of the institutions of government, ownership of the institutions of integrity. So, yes, jail the corrupt, get convictions, but I think we also have to do beyond that, talking about naming and shaming, and also, he said, importance of speedy convictions, which is lacking, because if the longer this thing drags, then the more you will lose enthusiasm for or even gain convictions at the end. And he suggested, among other things, the EFCC should consider volunteers. In fact, I'll go a step further. We must all be volunteers. We must all be volunteers. And we mustn't wait till the EFCC calls us to volunteer in our various ways to really deal with this issue of corruption, to fight corruption. Soji Apampa, whom I actually like, contrary to what he thought, is that we cannot isolate one strategy, such as, for example, the civil prosecution. It has to be a comprehensive approach. We must also stress prevention. And society must be driven by change in our attitude and values. And the fundamental question he asks is not so much the ones we've been asking, but how leadership emerge.
When God's house shall be lifted high, above all mountains high, and all men shall come running in. Now prophecies are fulfilling. All who want songs are singing. If you have been standing on your watch, you can see what Jah is saying. I see the glory in Nigeria. The glory of this latter house. The glory of this latter house. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former. The glory of this latter house. I see the glory. The glory of this latter house. I see the glory. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former. Listen up. Woo! Oh, yeah. In the days of his power, God's people shall be willing. The people shall be willing. The Lord said, put the rod of my strength out of Zion. Oh, yea. To rule in the midst of my enemies. Now these are the days of his power. Scriptures I know cannot be broken. And he what the prophet has spoken. The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdom of our dear God. And he shall reign forever and ever. Arise, shine, your light is come. And upon you the glory is risen. Fred Williams, the messenger, is saying, hurry, 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 come to. I see the glory. Can you prophesy? Come on, put your hand on your chest. Put your right hand on your chest and sing it. Say, the glory of this latter. You are the latter house. You are the latter house, all right? Shall be greater than the former. The glory of this latter house. I see the glory of this latter house. Say the glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former. Listen up. You know what? We never bow down to false tradition because the glory is more than religion. We never bow down to false prophets because we know Satan later in killing. There's a spirit in man, the inspiration of the Lord, and the Almighty gives insight. I see the glory. I see the glory. Say. The glory of this latter house. The glory of this latter house. The glory of this latter house shall be greater than the former. That's right. Say. The glory. I see the glory. Say. Greater shall be greater than the former. Yeah. Fred Williams.
Thank you, Fred. Stop there. Are you sure we're not going to do some Rastaman kind of steps?
I'm telling you, it should have been done.
We need the boom, 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 boom. So that we can get the steps right, Fred.
Telling
We
you,
need the
I'm telling you.
You're not doing the steps, you're telling me.
That's the reason why, you see, Mrs. Fatima Bada, the Executive Director of Finance, if she were going to sign a check for Fred right now, it will not be a check of this present house.
No,
it
it's
will
a
be a
blank
check of the latter house,
You know.
which is greater than the former. I might say something, Fred Williams.
Thank you very much, Fred. Thank you.
I'm sure that our mommy, Mrs. Fatima Bada, by the way, put your hands together for her. I'm very happy she's here. Executive Director of Finance. She's live in our midst. Thank you very much for being here.
And also, the person who is in charge ensuring the properties of NTA are well secured, the Managing Director, NTA Properties, Mrs. Lydia Shuaibo is here with us. Please put your hands together for her.
Thank you very much.
And when it comes to colorful entertainment on our screens, NTA Entertainment, we have the person in charge here with us, GM NTA Entertainment, Teni Ajayi. A great woman, I tell you.
Good to see you again, Madam Tenny. That's your lovely face, I can see. Your face is entertaining, so entertainment has to be good all the time.
Ever looking young.
All right, you know, when you talked about the person taking care of our properties, I remember the people taking care of our security. Here they are.
Indeed.
Now, usually, you would see these guys in military uniform and paramilitary with guns and handcuffs and all that. But this is a group that sings in the Military Christian Fellowship. And I confirm that what they do is they shoot the devil, they handcuff demons, by their praises, heaven.
And you know, Tokbe,
Yes.
when God gives you a task, He equips you with what you're going to use to handle that task.
That's right.
So today, they're not here with their guns, they're here with their voices. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Nigerian Military Christian Fellowship here representing.
A big hand for them as they sing.
Somebody make some noise. I want to see you rise on your feet and shout hallelujah. Where are my praisers? I know I have praisers in the house. I want you to rise on your feet and shake your body like never before. Are you ready? Are you ready now? Are you ready now? Are you ready now? Cha, 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 cha. Let me hear you sing. Jehovah Mary, one Mary, one Mary, one song. Jehovah Mary, one Mary, one Mary, one. I can hear you. Oh, my God, like your song. Jehovah, my God, like your. Oh, my God, like your song. Gonzo, 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 la 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 la, la, Gonzo, Omega la yoso. Jehovah Shammah, Lion of Judah. If you're running low, we wouldn't elope. Makanyo, you have defeated the devil. How good a chamber, Baba, you have delivered me. My zero, you turn to hero. My failure, you turn to success. When the series is over, you say you just start with me. Everywhere I go, always sing the song, say, Baba Mo, Omegwara your song. Let me hear you sing, Jehovah Mary, Mary, Jehovah Mary, Mary, let me see you shake your body. Jehovah Omegwara your song. Jehovah Omegwara your song. After 12 years, You heal the woman with the issue of blood. Lord, there is nothing hard for you. As such a lover, such around the world, there is none like you, none beside thee. Jehovah Dogu, yes and yes, Olorin and Orion, up your tone, Chimo, Dadimo, Chimo. Aha. You're not a man that you should lie. You will never fail. You are the Lord, that is your name. You bless my soul, you heal my life. That is why I say, oh my God, your soul. Let me hear you sing. Mary, you are so. Jehovah. Jehovah, make one lion, oh make one lion, so I can hear you. Jehovah, Mary, oh make one, oh so. Enemy man, the big berem nala, Chineke, Ebubedike, Odogu, oh mati, strong, bigger, better. Onye neme man, ne big berem nala.
Hallelujah.
Oh my God.
They want to bring the house down.
No, I am thinking if they go to Maiduguri,
they will do it better.
And sing like this.
The Boko Haram will just drop all their weapons.
Bakam.
I surrender.
Bakam.
It is over.
We need to increase this military choir so that all the security challenges will be solved. Gidigam. Everybody say Gidigam.
But let's put our hands together for our wonderful military choir. Now, they don't just only know how to carry guns and keep us safe, but also how to sing praises to the Most High God.
That's right. So we'll move on to the next song. The RCCG choir is getting ready. But before the RCCG, as a bridge, we have...
Berry Bullet has a special kind of story. One that speaks of unity in Nigeria, one that speaks of oneness, which is what the NTA Choir Concert is promoting. You will be amazed that it is a Muslim that is sponsoring her career. Please put your hands together for that.
Did you hear that?
That is what NTA is all about.
Sponsoring
and that's
her
what Nigeria should
career.
be about.
That's right. Berry Bullet.
RCCG Province 4, please get set.
The title of my song is Mercy Seat. I'm so privileged to stand before you today.
You know your...
Where hope does not be, where no mercy for you. There's a place where love never ends, where you can find the peace that you need. He said that we can come into his presence without fear, into his holy place where his mercy hovers near. Come running to
is calling. He said he'll be your covering. His blood will flow freely. It will provide your healing. Come running to the mercy seat. Come running to the mercy seat. In darkness, where everything is unknown, I face the power of sin on my own. I did not know where I should go, but there's a place anywhere I could wear my wounded soul. Oh, he said that you can come into his presence without fear, into his holy place where his mercy hovers near. Come running, come running, come running to the mercy seat where Jesus is calling. He said to be your covering. His blood will flow freely. It will provide your healing. Come running, come running, come running, come running, come running, come running, come running to the mercy seat where Jesus is calling. He said he'll be your covering. His blood will flow freely. Olúwa, Olúwa, his blood will flow freely. Yeah, yes, oh, what's in my candle? His blood will flow freely. Dare, Olúwa, his blood will flow freely. Yeah, 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 yeah. Your soul, your soul, your soul. Yeah, 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 yeah. Your soul. His blood will, his blood will, his blood will flow freely. It will provide your healing. Come running to the mercy seat.
Thank you very much, Barry Bullet. Now the RCCG Province 4. Let's go. RCCG, your time starts now. Put your hands together for RCCG Province 4. Thank you very much. Now, finally on this set, we'll be taking Chorale de Angelis. Chorale de Angelis will be coming up, but just as they get set, we'll have Deborah Energo JP tune us to heaven in 3 minutes. Your time starts now, Deborah.
Hallelujah. Someone who is alive in the house of God this afternoon, can you shout, hallelujah? Kenenonya kerigwenuwa. Kenenonya kerigwenuwa. Kenenonya kerigwenuwa. What will you say? Hey! Abo, 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 abo. Kenenonya kerigwenuwa. Kenenonya kerigwenuwa. Kenenonya kerigwenuwa. Oro yisinala. Onye wa yezitewo. Dimozine kanonyela. Hey, you are the living God. Is there no one like you? And the double Jehovah, Otowa Inene. Hey, and the double Jehovah, Atona Inene. Hey, and the Devamo talking down where, oh Jehovah, Inene to know, and the Devamo talking down where, oh Jehovah, oh Jehovah, oh Kinabuwe, oh Jehovah, Inene to know, and the Devamo talking down where, oh Jehovah, Inene to know, 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 Can you lift up your hands wherever you are? Oh, Kaka. Oh, Kaka. Yes, Itebube. Ahagi, Jureligwe. know you can receive your miracle even on this ground? Do you know that Jesus is here? Ẹ̀mí mímọ́ káàbọ̀, káàbọ̀, káàbọ̀. Ẹ̀mí mímọ́ káàbọ̀, káàbọ̀, káàbọ̀. Jesus, you are welcome into this place. Ẹ̀mí mímọ́ káàbọ̀, káàbọ̀, káàbọ̀.
We welcome the Father, we welcome the Son, we welcome the Holy Spirit. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, shortly after this choral group presenting, we'll be listening to the Director General of the Federal Radio Corporation. We'll hear a brief sermon and we'll listen to Mr. Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria. At the moment, please welcome Chorale de Angelis. A round of applause will be appropriate. DG Radio Night, DG NTA, I beg your pardon, will be speaking, and then we'll have the short sermon, and the Vice President will speak afterwards. So DG Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, well ably represented. Chorale de Magnific, Chorale de Angelis.
Sing
Thank you very much, Chorale de Angelis. Please put your hands together once again for Chorale de Angelis. Thank you very much. Lovely angels indeed. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's about that time we call on the man who is leading the ship of the Nigerian Television Authority to come talk to us, give us some words of encouragement. Please make welcome Representative Director General NTA, Malam Yakubu Ibn Mohammed, represented by the Executive Director of Programs, Mr. Wale Koka. Please put your hands together for him. The man who is changing the face of the Directorate of Programs.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, ably represented here by the State House Chaplain, Pastor Oluseyi Malomo, who is here with his beautiful wife, Mrs. Obiageli Malomo. You're welcome to NTA. Pastor in charge of RCCG Province 4, Abuja, Pastor Dr. Babade Bamidele, you're welcome. Reverend Canon Jacob Ibieton, Chairman NTA Choir Planning Committee, and also Chaplain of NTA Chapel of Resurrection. You're welcome. Reverend Venerable Andrews Ukejiafo, Archdeacon Vicar, St. James Anglican Church at Sokoro, you're welcome. I also want to welcome Bishop Edwin Jarumi, who is our guest minister and our guest speaker today. I stand here on behalf of the Director General, Malam Yakubu Ibn Mohammed, and on behalf of NTA, I want to welcome you to one of the greatest creations in NTA, the NTA Arena. And looking around, this is one time that this place has been filled with all the angelic voices we've heard so far. I believe we will all enjoy our evening here. On behalf of DGNTA, I welcome Professor Yemi Osinbajo, like I said earlier, being represented by none other than the chaplain of the Aso Chapel, Pastor Seyi Malomo. You are welcome. The NTA Choir Concert, which is the second edition, is a creation of NTA Staff Fellowship with the aim of praising God at all times. With what we have heard so far, from those angelic voices, from the various choirs, the wall of Jericho will definitely fall. It's not by might or by physical strength, but by the quality of praises to God Almighty. We in NTA have a strong faith that Nigeria will be great and things will turn around for good. This is our own contribution to nation building, aside from our other duties. It is our belief that this second edition will heal our land in Jesus' name. I want to thank you all for coming. And like I said, this is one time we are seeing a full arena in a long time. And the beauty of what we are enjoying here is not something that happens every day. So please let us be patient, and enjoy praises to God with the angelic choirs and various singers from various churches. I thank you on behalf of my Director General and on behalf of NTA. Thank you and welcome you again.
Put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for the DG NTA. I say put your hands together for Jesus. Somebody shout hallelujah. I say shout hallelujah. If you love Jesus, say yo. If you love Jesus, shake your neighbor. Shout hallelujah. Somebody, one more time. Thank you very much. We are proceeding very seriously in this program, and I'm sure you are enjoying yourself so far. We're going to have the late in NTA, we give breaking news. But this time around, we're going to have a break.